Hey guys, welcome back for part three of our analysis of Fahrenheit 451. We're still in chapter one. We just left off with the, interaction about the hound, and we see a little bit about Beatty. I did neglect to mention in the last episode the way that ended was really important. The concept of smiles are important in this book. Beatty, the very last part before we switch, it says, Beatty stood there looking at him steadily with his eyes, while his mouth opened and he began to laugh very softly. So this is a really disturbing image. Like I said, you get some ideas that Beatty's a bad guy. This is one. He makes a comment to Montag and then just kind of stares at him. And then starts laughing real soft and sinisterly. Indicates that he knows something maybe about Montag, and it just is supposed to be unnerving. Bradbury and most good writers will leave these little breadcrumbs to get good readers to catch on to stuff earlier. Now you're going to know for sure in this section that Beatty's a bad guy. He's going to break one of the cardinal rules for characters that automatically cast them as a bad guy. So we're going to see that in just a little bit. But let's pick up. We start with there's a little bit more of a Clarisse passage. We got two big ones in here, or one big one particularly. Clarisse mentions something, speaking of laughs, about Montag's laugh. She says, "Your laugh sounds much nicer than it did. Does it? More relaxed." So again, this idea that Montag is more relaxed, and he started thinking, and now he's not just laughing as a reaction. I mean, you can't. All the time we do this. People will say something, you just kind of and then you don't even think, well, it's not even funny. It's just a knee jerk reaction. It's like a lot of people do. This one's a pet peeve of mine. When someone is talking and you immediately say what before you process what they said, and then you go ahead and answer the question. You heard him. Why are you saying what? Well, because we just feel like we need to fill silence with noise. It's why people go like all the time in their speech. So she's noticed now that Montag's laughing for real, not for this fake laugh. Okay. Um, Now then, here is like the defining passage about Clarisse, in my opinion. It's the part where she talks about school in their world. And guys, this is another thing that Bradbury seemed to be on the forefront of. And while no, not all of this has come true, a lot of this is spot on for our schools. Okay. Now I'm gonna read a bit of a passage here, and I apologize for that. All right. She says, I'm antisocial, they say. I don't mix. It's so strange. I'm very social indeed. It all depends on what you mean by social, doesn't it? Now, first of all, before we read the big passage, Clarice is not at all antisocial. That is ridiculous. But we see again how easy it is to take a word and kidnap it and change it to mean something completely different. For them, antisocial means that you don't go along with what society says. It doesn't mean that you don't interact with people. In fact, in their society, interaction's a lot less important, to be honest. All right, let's read what they say about school. It says, I don't think it's social to get a bunch of people together and then not let them talk, do you? Now, again, I interrupted myself. I'm sorry. Think about that for a second. A lot of people get together and then don't talk. Think about how that works out today in our world, all right? You guys get together and you get out your phones and spend half your time not speaking to each other. You're on your phones doing stuff. And this is not what Bradbury meant when he wrote this, but it fits. It says an hour of TV class, an hour of basketball or baseball or running, another hour of transcription history or painting pictures, and more sports. But do you know what? We never ask questions, or at least most don't. They just run the answers at you, bing, 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 and us sitting there for 4 more hours of film teacher. That's not social to me at all. It's a lot of funnels and a lot of water poured down the spout and out the bottom, and them telling us it's wine when it's not. They run us so ragged that by the end of the day, we can't do anything but go to bed or head to a fun park to bully people around, break window panes in the window smasher, or wreck cars in the car wrecker with a big steel ball. So, a couple of things in that. Notice their classes in school. Now, there's nothing wrong with art. There's nothing wrong with sports, and all those things are great. But when you take the difficult classes, the core classes out, and you dumb things down in some ways. I don't mean dumb them down as in the sports and art and electives are bad, but you need those other things. They're called core for a reason. Your maths, your sciences, your Englishes, your histories. You need these because they're the ones that are going to develop critical thinking. You're not going to develop much critical thinking except situationally in sports. I mean, you have some critical thinking there, but it's nothing like what you need in those other four classes. So every time you complain about, well, am I going to ever need algebra? Maybe you won't, but you do need to learn those thinking skills. And that's something that they don't seem to have. So, excuse me, my cat's over there. The other important thing was, look what they say about what their fun parks are. There are places where you break things, all right? And that's going to play into the next part of this. Clarisse is talking about the kids her age, and she says, I'm afraid of children. I'm sorry. I'm afraid of children my own age. They kill each other. Did it always used to be that way? My uncle says no. There's a side of these very violent children in this. And again, this comes from not thinking. Thinking develops empathy, meaning not apathy, guys, empathy. Empathy is being able to, feel what other people are feeling. And we need to think that way, because if not, we're selfish people. And if we're selfish people, we don't care about hurting others. And this is not a good thing, okay? All right, then more Clarisse. She says, I like to watch people. Sometimes I sneak around. I'm skipping in between here, guys. I like to watch people. I sneak around and listen in subways, or I listen at soda fountains. And do you know what? What? People don't talk about anything. Oh, they must. No, not anything. They name a lot of cars or clothes or swimming pools mostly and say how swell. But then they say the same things and nobody says anything different from anyone else. All right, once again, conversation today. Bradbury was right on. We spend so much time just, hey, did you see that movie? Yeah, I saw that movie. It was really good, wasn't it? Yeah, I really liked when. I mean, we find ourselves having those kinds of conversations where all you're doing is saying what there's nothing of consequence. Now, every conversation doesn't have to be deep and filled with meaning, but I mean, occasionally it'd be nice if one or two did. But so much of it is just, hey, look at my phone, look at this meme, and that's it. That's not conversation. That's not intelligent. That doesn't do anything except pass time. All right. After this conversation, we go into a very short passage, and it's just like a week of Montag at the firehouse. But then this line says, and then Clarisse was gone. He didn't know what there was about the afternoon, but it was not seeing her somewhere in the world. So, guys, that's it for Clarisse. We don't see her again in the book. Her part has been fulfilled. Now, for most people that I teach, Clarisse is their favorite character, even though she's only in here briefly. But it's just because of the way she is. She's an interesting person. And her job right now was to get Montag to start thinking. She has done that. So Bradbury has removed her from the book, and we're about to find out what happened to her. So not too much longer. But now she's gone. Our first guide is moved on. Each of our guides is going to serve time briefly and then move on. Some for different reasons. So she's moved on. Montag has started thinking, and there's something else that's going to happen that's going to really push him over the edge. Okay, he started thinking. Now we need that tipping point. All right. We end up back at the firehouse. Lots of imagery here. We see the war thing show back up. They talk on the radio. They're talking about a war. We also get this description of the firemen. It's one of Bradbury's descriptive passages. Once again, you can tell when you get a long paragraph that you're in for description usually. All right, so we get this long paragraph talking about, the fireman. He uses descriptions like soot-colored brows, charcoal hair, bluish ash smeared cheeks. I mean, like I said, Bradbury can use description. He just doesn't use a lot, all right? And that's good. Sometimes description's ponderous, okay? Montag asks a question, though, and this kind of gets things going. He asked about a previous fire they were at, and he asked what happened to the owners. And Beatty, who just his language just comes up. Not to mention he cusses way too much, but the language he uses, he's very flippant. He's very no big deal to things that are exceptionally big deals. All right. So Montag asks about this guy. Beatty says they took him screaming off to the asylum. Montag points out he wasn't insane, and Beatty says any man's insane who thinks he can fool the government and us. So that's not a statement that's made by people we like. It's just not. That's a scary statement. Again, once you've read the book and you know Beatty's the bad guy, you can pick up on lines like this. Honestly, guys, if you really want to be able to interpret a book, one time through is not enough. And I know most of you aren't going to read multiple times, but you really need to. I laugh when kids are like, "Oh, I saw that movie and I caught so much more the second time." Yeah, that's how most things work. It's not just that movie. Trust me. Listen to what Montag's going to make two big mistakes here. Okay, look at the first one. I'm going to read this whole section. It says, I've tried to imagine, said Montag, just how it would feel. To have firemen burn our houses and our books. No, our books, Montag, really? And then a little bit later, he points out, he says, he's asking about houses burning, the thing that Clarisse asked him. He says, well, once upon a time, and Beatty responds with, once upon a time, what kind of talk is that? See, that's not the way people would talk in that time period. That is a 100% a fairy tale intro, and they didn't read fairy tales. So what happened is Montag has read that. He saw it at a fire. He saw the book, it opened up, he kind of glanced at it, he heard the line, and it stuck with him. So 2 times now, he's kind of indicated he has books, all right? Now, partner that with and it mentions it again here too, him going back to his house and looking up at his ventilator grill, all right? Guys, I mean, it's not a big spoiler. If you're an all intelligent person, you kind of caught on. Montag's got books hidden at his house. He's not read them. He doesn't know what to do with them. He's just keeping them because, well, I mean, he's told he can't. A lot of times people are that way. The government all of a sudden came out and banned something. I don't mean something that's bad for us. I mean banned something like crayons. We'd all wonder why can't we have crayons anymore? And eventually some of us might hold on to them because we realize, hey, these are rare and these are special apparently. So that's just the reason he has them. All right. We get a little bit of history of the fire department, if you want to look at that. But really, the important part of this entire section, besides the thing about Clarisse, is the part where they go on the fire call. All right. So while they're playing cards, which we see them doing a lot, they all of a sudden get a call. They show up at a house, and something's different about this fire. Normally, the police show up early, they take the homeowner away, and then the firemen show up afterwards, burn the house, the end. This time, though, the lady's still there. And so when they show up, everyone seems to react fine, except it bothers Montag greatly. Now, I told you we were going to get something about Beatty that indicated he's a bad guy. There's several things you can't do. I've got a big 3 that I always tell kids. If you have a character do one of these 3 things, it's not good, okay? You can't hurt an animal. Like a cat or a dog. If somebody comes through and kicks a dog, they automatically, the audience doesn't react well. You can't hurt children. Hurting children also makes you a bad guy. The third one's what Beatty does. You can't hit old people, especially not women. These are not acceptable. What you have is 3 different groups here that it's no fight to hurt depending on the dog, but it's no fight to hurt a dog, a child, or an older person. So when Beatty shows up at this house, he sees the old lady and he asks her a question. She doesn't respond. He slaps her, and that is, okay, Beatty's the bad guy. All right, you can look for that. I would be hard pressed to find any character who does one of those 3 things and is ever considered a good guy again. I'm sure there's examples, but it's rare, and you got to do a lot of work to recover your character. So Beatty hits this lady. She's standing there and she's quoting something. She's quoting a line from a historical line, and this is one of the lines that Fahrenheit 451 is known for no good reason, to be honest. She says, "Play the man, Master Ridley. We shall this day light such a candle by God's grace in England as I trust shall never be put out." And she's talking about a martyr, Nicholas Ridley. He was burned at the stake in the 1500s. Burned at the stake for a heresy, and the idea here was that this was going to be something that carried out from then on, and that people were going to profit from, not profit in a bad way, but people were going to learn from, and that this was going to be a fire that would never be put out. So she says that, and ironically, she's right, because this is the point for Montag that pushes him over the edge. I think if this hadn't happened, he might have been able to bury all this stuff and go right back to his regular life, but he can't this way. All right, so notice how the firemen react during the fire. They're playing like they're little kids. They're having a good old time. Everybody but Montag. Montag's definitely not having a good time. He is so upset that this woman's still there because he's being forced to confront what he does. All right. And speaking, if he wasn't concerned about that, look what happens. All right, they're getting ready to leave. They've soaked the whole house with kerosene. They're trying to drag the lady out. And says, "You can't ever have my books," she said. "You know the law," said Beatty. "Where's your common sense? None of those books agree with each other. You've been locked up here for years with a regular Tower of Babel. Snap out of it. The people in those books never lived. Come on now." She shook her head. So Beatty has a point. I mean, books do contradict each other. I mean, that's just because a lot of them are opinion-based. Now, you get a political book, you got one opinion here that says one thing and one that says something completely different over here. You got books that, proclaim God. You've got some that say there is no such thing. I mean, they're contradictory, and that's good. And Beatty's idea is that we shouldn't read those things because they just confuse us. But guys, confusion's good. It makes us think. All right, let's look what happens to this lady. Montag is trying to save her because she's refusing to leave her house, and her house is about to go up in flames. Montag comes up to her and says, "You can come with me." "No," she said. "Thank you anyway." "I'm counting to 10, said Beatty. 1, 2, please, said Montag. "Go on," said the woman. 3, 4. Here, Montag pulled at the woman. The woman replied quietly, I want to stay here. 5, 6. You can stop counting, she said. She opened the fingers of one hand slightly, and in the palm of her hand was a single slender slender object, an ordinary kitchen match. By the way, an ordinary kitchen match gets its own paragraph. It's not even a full sentence. It's that powerful. It's meant to draw you to that. Go, oh my God, this woman cares so much about her book. She's willing to not only burn to death, but to do it herself. This is the point where Montag goes, there must be something in these. This has got to, why would anyone go to this level? And it's not just one person. This isn't one crazy person. There's been a lot of people who've done this. So what is so special about them? It's hard to believe that there's stuff out there that people would be willing to kill themselves over or to die for. Man, most of us couldn't pick anything. Oh, you might say you would, but I honestly think given the situation and put in that spot, a lot of us would cave in a heartbeat. The woman does light herself on fire, though, and it impacts all of the men, because you notice in the next section that on the way back they don't say anything, they don't look at each other. They're really, I mean, this is a traumatic experience for them. Now, Montag brings up the quote, the Master Ridley quote, and Beatty re-quotes it back to him verbatim, word for word, and also says what the context of it is. And he points out something again that should be suspicious. He says, I'm full of bits and pieces. Most fire captains have to be. Sometimes I surprise myself. Beatty's an exceptionally intelligent guy. This is our first clue. We're going to find out more later. Beatty's very well read. Beatty represents the people who want to keep resources for themselves and want to keep everyone else, away from those resources. For them, it's intelligence. And if everyone else is ignorant and you're the smartest person there's amazing things you can do. A lot of evil things too. So, this is one of the things that caused when the Bible started being printed in the everyday language, people struggle. I mean, the church at that time, not our church today, the church at that time was very upset about that because it took a lot of power away. Because now people could look and say, wait a minute, does the Bible really say that? And that gave power to the people. And this is what this culture's managed to do, is to take that away by burning all the books and saying, now you can't think for yourselves. You have to think what we tell you. And, that's usually, if you find someone telling you that, it's not a good thing. All right. Okay, let's keep going. I'm going to rush through the rest of this to get us to the stopping point. All right. We get back home. Montag goes into his room. We get another scene with him and Mildred. She kind of seems uninterested in his day. She eventually gets up and checks on him because he's making noises, and she finds out he's crying. So we see that there is definitely an impact on Montag here. All right. So later in the night, Montag's rolling around, and he looks over at Mildred. Notices the ear thimbles, what they call it, with the radio in her ear, and just starts thinking about how far apart they really are. And he picks up, he starts thinking, and he can't remember where they met. And that seems like it's such a minor thing, but man, guys, if you can't remember where you met your husband or wife, that's a sad thing. I mean, my wife and I met a long time ago, and I still remember the moment, the place, and the context. All right. If we had more time in the video, I'd share it with you, but trust me, I remember it. All right. Mildred doesn't. She doesn't remember. And she even says, it's been so long. It's been so long. Why would I remember it? Montag points out it's only been 10 years. She says, it's funny not to remember where or when you met your husband or wife. And then she goes on to say, it doesn't matter. And then she gets up and goes and takes more sleeping pills. Now, not enough to kill her, but she goes take some more. She just doesn't want to deal with it. She doesn't want to talk about it. Anything that requires depth of conversation, she doesn't want to participate in. And then a telling section for Montag. And a lot of people miss it when they read on their own. You may have missed it, but listen to this. It says, he remembered thinking that if she died, he was certain he wouldn't cry. For it would be the dying of an unknown, a street face, a newspaper image, and it was suddenly so very wrong that he had begun to cry, not at death, but at the thought of not crying at death. A silly, empty man near a silly, empty woman. I mean, wow, what a this guy has realized, hey, I don't like my job. I'm doing something I shouldn't. Now he's realized, I don't really love my wife. In fact, I wouldn't be scared. I wouldn't cry if she died. And that is such a disturbing image. This man's entire life has been wrecked in the span of half a day. And not to mention, he's lost the one person he could really talk to about it. So, a lot of the rising action in books is this cratering where you start to lose everything. Because to build a new person, you have to lose everything you had before. That's a dystopian hallmark. They love to do this to their main characters. All right. All right. He does point out that the reason him and Mildred are so divided and there's just no love there is because of the TVs. The entertainment has separated them. And again, that is a Bradbury nailed the future. And it's not just TV though; it's your phones. Our phones divide us so much. I can't tell you how many times I see couples out, young and old. This isn't just a you guys thing; it's everybody sitting on their phone instead of interacting and having time together. And most of their conversation involves sharing what they read on the phone or showing each other pictures, and that's not really a relationship. You don't. There's no strength of relationship in that. All right. We get a kind of a flashback. It's kind of weird. Bradbury plays with chronology a little bit. I don't really like it a lot, but if you read the book carefully, it's not a problem. But they start talking about like the TV shows Mildred watches, and one of the things we're going to get brought back over and over is that these TV shows are stupid, guys. I mean, they're dumbed down even to our part. We'll find out later how short they are, which when I first started teaching this, I thought was stupid. But you can see shows now that are that short. Things like Robot Chicken, 15 minutes, and then with take commercials out, it's like 9 to 11 minutes, not time period. So shortness is happening, and also the lack of depth. I mean, you got to think about how many shows we have that have very little depth. Now, there are still plenty of shows that do. Okay, I want you to understand this isn't an assault on all TV shows. You don't have to, throw down, well, Mr. Morris, what about this or this or this? There's a lot that do, but there's a lot that don't as well. There's definitely don't. So Montag sits there with Mildred and watches a scene. At the end, he asks her, "Well, what's going on? Well, why are these people angry? Who are they even?" I don't. I mean, if you can look in your book, you can see. I see right here. See the short dialogue and this. I mean, that's what's going on. There's barely anything. They're just yelling back and forth at each other. So he asked Mildred about the show, and listen to this. They said Mildred, well, they have this fight. You see, they certainly fight a lot. You should listen. I think they're married. Yes, they're married. I mean, listen to her conversation. I mean, it's like, I mean, that's worse than talking to a child. All right. She doesn't understand what's going on either. Guys, when you don't have critical thinking, you start to lose basic thinking, to be honest with you. And that's what we're seeing happen. Mildred comes off, with the exception of, and this is a huge error for Bradbury, in my opinion. Mildred is like the dumbest character I've seen in most books throughout this book. She has one moment where she becomes really smart and then she goes back to being dumb. I guess he just couldn't. He painted himself in a corner and had to come up with something, and that's what he did. But she's definitely just. All right. Then the last part of this is when Montag, as Mildred is going to sleep and starting to fade away again, the topic of Clarisse comes up, and Montag asks her, "Hey, have you seen this girl? And she lives next door. I haven't seen her in a few days." And Mildred breaks this news that she's been holding for 4 days, and she just didn't think was important. And that's what the family moved out, and Clarisse was killed. She was hit by a car. We're gonna find out later. And hey, not to spoil it for you, that it's not that Beatty hit her, but Beatty made sure she was gone. Um, so and Montag's upset, and understandably, he's like, "You didn't think to tell me that?" Let me tell you something. If someone got hit by a car out in front of my house, or if I knew a family nearby had lost someone, my wife would tell me immediately, or I would tell her. That would be just, the biggest thing that had happened that day. You know why Mildred didn't? Because it wasn't about her. We're going to find out as we get into this that not just Mildred, but this whole society is obsessed with themselves, and that's all they care about. And as we end that, let me point that to us today. All right. I'd like to say we're not that bad yet, but guys, we are. We're seeing this. Again, I keep pointing to current events, but you look at the news right now and how many people are so obsessed with just themselves. And they'd like to hide it and, hey, I'm trying to protect my family, but it's not about that. In times like this, people should band together and help each other as a group, not just, hey, it's all me for me. And we are bad about that. We're really bad about that, guys. I find myself being that way sometimes. I'm not speaking as like, oh, you guys need to quit being selfish. I find myself that way too, but I try to overcome it and little things each day to fix that. I know my wife and I, when we went to the grocery store during all of this, we don't load up a ton of stuff. We'll go to multiple places and buy just a few things and make sure whatever we buy, there's stuff on the shelves for other people too. We want to be prepared, but we also don't want to scare people, and we don't want to take from people who need it. Other people have families too. So one of the lessons we're getting here is that when we become selfish, we can get to a point where we neglect to see the suffering in others, and that makes us, not just careless individuals. And Mildred is the example of that. She doesn't care about anyone but herself, and if it doesn't deal with her, I mean, even when it comes to Montag, she's more concerned about getting a new TV and spending him working harder so she can have something she wants. So pretty disturbing image. And by the way, it's the world we live in. All right. Again, one of the things about dystopian novels is they show us what the world could be like. We're not there yet, but we're close. And if we're not careful, we're going to end up there. Now, you'll never end up probably to those extremes, but even halfway to this is too much. Where we are is too much. All right. So anyway, guys, as I close out, I want you to think about ways that you can show that you care for others today. Reach out to someone. You know, you've got resources. Call a family member you haven't seen. Talk to a friend who you haven't seen in a while. Check in with some people whose families maybe don't do as well as yours, and make sure they're doing okay. See if there's any way you can help. All right. Let's all, treat each other properly. Okay. One of the good lessons that's hidden in this book. All right. Long video. Like I said, I apologize. I'm going to stop it, and then I'm going to recollect myself, get the next section ready, and get these other videos out today. All right. Thank you, guys. And I apologize for this being a little bit disjointed. All right.